For more than 40 years, Calvin Reed had protected one secret with everything he had. His children did not know. His closest friends did not know. The men who worked beside him believed he was simply quiet. At restaurants, he always forgot his glasses. At church, he asked his wife to read the announcements because she had a better voice. When forms appeared, he joked that his handwriting was too ugly for anyone to understand. Calvin had built an entire life around one hidden truth: he could not read. Then, under the bright lights of Family Feud, his wife revealed it in front of Steve Harvey, their family, and a full studio audience. The question was, name something a husband might hide because he is embarrassed. Calvin's wife, Lorraine, looked at the board and said, "He cannot read." Calvin turned toward her so quickly that his hand struck the podium. "Lorraine." The pain in his voice silenced the audience. Steve stared at the couple. At first, he thought he had misunderstood. "Wait a minute," he said. "Your husband cannot read?" Lorraine's eyes filled with tears. "No, Steve. He never learned." Steve looked at Calvin, a 62-year-old master mechanic who had raised 3 children and worked for the same transit company for 38 years. "Nobody knows," Calvin whispered. Lorraine reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. "It was not your secret to tell." Steve slowly lowered the question card. He could see shame, anger, and fear moving across Calvin's face. He also saw that Lorraine was not celebrating the reveal. She looked terrified that she had hurt the man she loved. The game stopped. What followed was not a funny television moment. It was the story of a child failed by adults, a man who survived through intelligence and memory, and a wife forced to choose between protecting her husband's pride and protecting his future. Calvin Reed grew up in a small Missouri town as the oldest of 5 children. His father worked at a steel plant, and his mother cleaned motel rooms. Both parents left school young. They believed education mattered, but exhaustion often filled their home more completely than books. Calvin entered 1st grade excited to learn. Within weeks, letters began moving on the page. He confused sounds, reversed words, and forgot sentences moments after hearing them. Today, a teacher might have recognized dyslexia or another learning difficulty. In 1970, his teacher called him lazy. When Calvin struggled to read aloud, students laughed. His teacher made him stand beside the blackboard until he finished a paragraph. Some days he stood there for nearly an hour. "You are not trying," she would say. Calvin was trying harder than anyone in the room. By 4th grade, he had learned to survive. He memorized stories while other children read them. He listened carefully when teachers explained assignments. He copied the shape of words without understanding them. If someone asked him to read, he created a distraction. At home, his father did not understand. "A man cannot make excuses," he said. "Work harder." Calvin worked harder. The shame only grew. At 15, he left school and began helping at an auto repair shop. Engines made sense in a way books never had. A broken vehicle did not laugh at him. Every sound had meaning. Every vibration pointed toward a problem. Within a year, Calvin could identify failing parts before older mechanics opened the hood. The owner, Mr. Harris, recognized his gift. "That boy hears an engine like other people hear music," he told customers. Mr. Harris also discovered Calvin could not read. Instead of exposing him, he placed colored marks on shelves and taught him part numbers through patterns. Calvin memorized entire repair manuals after someone explained them aloud. "Not reading does not mean you are not smart, Mr. Harris told him. "But one day, hiding may cost you more than learning." Calvin never forgot the words. He still did not ask for help. He met Lorraine at 21 when she brought her mother's car to the shop. Calvin repaired a broken belt and refused payment because the family was struggling. Lorraine returned the next afternoon with a peach pie. She was studying early childhood education and loved books. On their first date, she talked about her favorite novels. Calvin nodded and said he preferred working with his hands. He wanted to tell her the truth. Each time he tried, fear stopped him. He believed an educated woman would see him differently. They married 2 years later. Lorraine noticed small things. Calvin never read restaurant menus. He asked her to handle bills because she was better with numbers. He avoided writing birthday cards and signed only his name. When she asked why he never read bedtime stories to their children, He said he was too tired after work. The truth came close to the surface many times. Once, their daughter Maya brought him a schoolbook and asked for help. Calvin studied the page, then pretended he had forgotten his glasses at the garage. "Ask your mother," he said. "She reads stories better." Maya walked away disappointed. Calvin sat alone in the kitchen and cried. Still, he hid the secret. His intelligence carried him forward. He joined the city transit authority as a mechanic and learned every bus model by observation. He remembered verbal instructions word for word. When new digital systems arrived, he asked younger workers to demonstrate them and then repeated the process perfectly. Supervisors promoted him because he could solve problems no manual explained. He became the person called when everyone else had failed. At home, Lorraine raised their 3 children, Maya, Terrence, and Kiara, while teaching kindergarten. Calvin never missed a school concert or doctor appointment. He repaired neighbors' cars for free when they could not pay. He taught his children how to change tires, keep promises, and respect people whose work was often ignored. Everyone considered him wise. That made the secret harder to reveal. Calvin believed that if his children discovered the truth, every lesson he had given them would lose value. He imagined coworkers laughing. He imagined Lorraine realizing she had married a fraud. Lorraine did not understand the full truth until 8 months before Family Feud. Calvin received a letter from the Transit Authority about a new safety certification. The test included written instructions and computer questions. Employees who failed twice could be reassigned or encouraged to retire. Calvin hid the letter in his workbench. Lorraine found it while looking for a screwdriver. At first, she thought he had forgotten to show her. Then she noticed several unopened envelopes beneath it, including medical instructions and retirement documents. That evening, she placed the safety letter on the table. "What is this?" she asked. Calvin looked at it and became pale. "Work paperwork. It says you have a certification exam." "I know. It also says there is a study guide." "Where is it?" "At work." Lorraine watched his face. After nearly 40 years, the small excuses suddenly formed one clear picture. "Calvin," she said gently, "can you read that letter?" He became angry. "What kind of question is that? Please answer me." Calvin stood and walked toward the door. Lorraine followed him. "You do not have to be ashamed." He stopped. "Do not say that word." "What word?" "Ashamed." His voice cracked. For the first time in their marriage, Calvin told her everything. He described the classroom, the laughter, the blackboard, and the years of memorizing his way through life. Lorraine cried, not because he could not read, but because he had carried the fear alone. "Why did you not trust me?" she asked. "Because you love books. You teach children to read. What would you think of a husband who cannot do what your students can do?" Lorraine placed both hands on his face. "I would think somebody failed that little boy. I would never think that man was stupid." She offered to help him prepare for the exam. Calvin refused. "I have survived this long. This is not only about work. What if you misunderstand medicine instructions? What if somebody asks you to sign something dangerous? I know how to take care of myself. You know how to hide." The sentence hurt him. For 3 days, they barely spoke. Lorraine contacted an adult literacy center without giving Calvin's name. The coordinator explained that millions of adults struggled with reading and that many were highly skilled workers. Private tutoring was available. Calvin still refused. "Nobody can know," he said. The Family Feud application had been submitted months earlier by their children. When the family was selected, Lorraine hoped the trip would bring joy before Calvin's certification deadline. Calvin saw the show as one final family adventure before retirement. Lorraine saw a man moving closer to a crisis while refusing every hand extended toward him. She did not plan to expose him, but she carried the literacy center's card in her purse, hoping she would find the courage to offer it again. The Reed family entered the studio wearing bright orange shirts. Calvin stood at the head of the line with Lorraine beside him. Their children and oldest granddaughter completed the team. Steve immediately liked Calvin. "What do you do, sir?" he asked. "I fix city buses," Calvin replied. "How long?" 38 years. Steve shook his hand. That is a working man right there. The audience applauded. Calvin smiled with pride. Steve asked what he enjoyed most about the job. A machine always tells the truth, Calvin said. You just have to listen long enough. Steve repeated the line. A machine always tells the truth. I like that. Lorraine looked at her husband. She wished he believed people could survive the truth too. The Reeds faced the Lawson family from Texas. Both teams began strongly. Calvin gave the top answer to name something people check before a long trip. He said, the car. Steve celebrated beside him. 38 years fixing buses, you better know that. In the next round, Calvin struggled when the board displayed a phrase before Steve read it aloud. He laughed and said the lights were reflecting off his glasses. Nobody questioned him. Lorraine noticed his hands shaking. During a break, she whispered, You are safe. Do not start, he replied. I am trying to help. Then help me keep this private. The game reached triple points with the Reeds behind by 40. Steve read the question, Name something a husband might hide because he is embarrassed. The Lawson family won the face-off and chose to play. Their answers included money problems, losing his job, and being afraid. Then they received 3 strikes. The Reeds gathered for a possible steal. Terrence suggested, a health problem. Kiara said, his age. Maya offered, something from his past. Lorraine could hear the certification clock in her mind. The exam was 6 weeks away. Calvin had not opened the study guide. If he failed, he planned to retire early and tell the family it was his choice. She looked at the man she loved. Protecting his secret had begun to feel like helping the fear destroy him. He cannot read, she said. Calvin turned toward her so quickly that his hand hit the podium. Lorraine. Their children stared at her. Maya whispered, What do you mean? Calvin's face filled with panic. She does not know what she is talking about. Lorraine began crying. Yes, I do. Steve stepped closer. Wait, are you saying your husband cannot read? He never learned, Lorraine answered. Calvin looked at the audience. The secret he had protected for decades now belonged to hundreds of strangers. Nobody knows, he said. Lorraine reached for him. He moved away. It was not your secret to tell. Steve lowered his card. We are stopping, he said. Calvin looked toward the backstage exit. I want to leave. Steve nodded. You can leave if you want. Nobody is going to trap you here. But before you go, I need you to know that nobody in this room is laughing. Calvin looked at the audience. Many people were crying. One older man stood with his hand over his heart. Steve continued. Not reading does not erase 38 years of work. It does not erase the family you raised. It does not erase what you know. Calvin's anger turned toward Lorraine. You promised nobody would know. I promised I would stand beside you, she replied. I did not promise I would help you lose your job and pretend it was a choice. The children looked confused. Steve asked Lorraine to explain. She told them about the certification test, the hidden letters, and the literacy center. Calvin stared at the floor. Terrence's eyes filled with tears. Dad, why did you not tell us? Calvin's voice became quiet. Because I am your father. What does that have to do with it? A father is supposed to teach his children. Maya moved closer. You taught me how to work, how to keep my word, and how to help people. Reading is one thing you did not learn. It is not everything you are. Calvin shook his head. You do not understand what people did to me. Lorraine answered softly. Then help us understand. For the first time, Calvin told his children about the blackboard. He described students laughing and a teacher calling him lazy. He explained how Mr. Harris marked shelves with colors and taught him to repair engines. His granddaughter, 14-year-old Ava, began crying. Grandpa, I have dyslexia, she said. Calvin looked up. What? I was diagnosed in 3rd grade. Mom got me a tutor. The letters moved for me too. Maya nodded. We wanted to tell you, but Ava was embarrassed. Ava walked toward her grandfather. You always tell me not to quit when something is hard. But you were hiding the same thing. Calvin covered his face. The secret he believed separated him from his family had connected him to his granddaughter. Steve removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. Sir, he said, You survived a system that did not know how to teach you. That took intelligence. But survival skills can become prisons. The tricks that protected you at 15 are keeping you trapped at 62. Calvin looked at Lorraine. You embarrassed me. I know, she said, and I am sorry for choosing the moment for you. But I am not sorry that the people who love you finally know how to help. Steve nodded. Both things can be true. She crossed a boundary, and you still deserve support. We do not have to make one person completely wrong to tell the truth. Lorraine took the Literacy Center card from her purse and placed it on the podium. I will go with you, she said. Or I will wait outside. Or I will never mention it again if that is what you choose. But please stop believing that learning would make your life a confession of failure. Calvin stared at the card. What if I cannot do it? Ava took his hand. Then we practiced together. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Steve asked the family if they wanted to continue. Calvin took several minutes before answering. I want to finish, he said. I have been running from words my whole life. I do not want to run off this stage. Steve shook his hand. That is courage. Before the game resumed, Calvin turned to Lorraine. I am angry. I know. But I know why you did it. You are allowed to be angry. And you are right about the test. Lorraine nodded without asking for forgiveness. The family returned to the survey. Steve repeated the question. Name something a husband might hide because he is embarrassed. He looked at Calvin. What answer are we using? Calvin swallowed. He cannot read. The board sounded. The number 4 answer appeared. Can't read. The reeds won the steal. Calvin stared at the words on the board. Steve read them aloud, then pointed toward the score. You were not the only person in that survey, he said. And you are not the only person watching tonight who carries this secret. The Reeds won the game and selected Lorraine and Calvin for fast money. Lorraine went first and scored 137 points. Calvin needed 63. Backstage, he nearly refused. What if I have to read something? He asked. Steve placed a hand on his shoulder. I ask the questions. You listen and answer. You have been doing that brilliantly your whole life. Calvin stepped to the fast money podium. Steve asked 5 questions. Calvin answered from experience and instinct. Name something people keep in a toolbox. A wrench. Name a reason someone might return to school as an adult. Calvin paused, to learn what they missed. The audience applauded before Steve could continue. When the answers were revealed, Calvin earned 81 points. The family total reached 218. Confetti filled the stage. Lorraine hugged her children. Calvin embraced Ava first. Then he turned toward Lorraine. I cannot forgive the way it happened today, he said quietly. Not yet. Lorraine nodded. I understand. But tomorrow, call the center. Lorraine covered her mouth and began crying. Are you sure? Calvin looked at the card on the podium. No, I am terrified. Call them anyway. Steve turned toward the camera. That is bravery, he said. Bravery is not standing here without fear. It is telling somebody to make the call while fear is still standing beside you. The morning after the family returned home, Lorraine called the Adult Literacy Center. She gave the phone to Calvin before the coordinator answered. His first instinct was to hang up. Instead, he said, My name is Calvin Reed. I need help reading. The sentence was harder than anything he had said on television. His tutor was a retired special education teacher named Mr. Allen. During their first meeting, Mr. Allen explained dyslexia and showed Calvin how the brain could process written language differently without lacking intelligence. Calvin became angry. You mean there was a reason? Yes, all those years they called me lazy. They were wrong. Calvin left the room and cried in his truck. Lorraine waited without following him. When he returned, he said, I want to come back Thursday. Learning was slow. Calvin began with sounds he remembered from childhood. He practiced reading street signs and grocery labels. Ava joined him by video twice a week. They compared strategies and celebrated small victories. The first full sentence Calvin read aloud was printed on a bus repair manual. Disconnect the battery before servicing the electrical system. He laughed for nearly a minute. I have told young mechanics that sentence 1,000 times, he said. Today I finally read it. At home, Lorraine and Calvin dealt with the broken boundary between them. Lorraine apologized without defending the public reveal. I was afraid, she said. I thought the pressure of the show might finally make you accept help. But love does not give me ownership of your story. Calvin appreciated the apology, but trust took time. They agreed that future personal revelations belonged to the person living them unless immediate safety was involved. Calvin also agreed that secrecy could not be used to block every conversation. Privacy needs a door, Lorraine said. Shame builds a wall. Calvin wrote the sentence in a notebook slowly and carefully. The Family Feud episode reached millions of viewers. The Literacy Center received hundreds of calls during the week after it aired. Men and women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s said they had hidden the same struggle for decades. Calvin received letters, though Lorraine had to read the first ones aloud. One came from a 69-year-old grandfather who had never read a birthday card from his grandchildren. After watching Calvin, he enrolled in a class. Another came from a mechanic in Detroit who had memorized parts catalogs the same way Calvin had. For the first time, Calvin understood that his secret was personal, but not unique. He passed the transit certification exam on his second attempt. The first failure hurt. The old voice of his teacher returned, calling him lazy and stupid. Calvin wanted to retire immediately. Mr. Allen placed the failed score beside a list of everything Calvin had learned in 4 months. A test tells us what to practice, he said. It does not tell us who you are. Calvin studied for 6 more weeks. The Transit Authority allowed the questions to be read through approved accessibility software after documentation of his dyslexia. He passed with 84%. When the result appeared, Calvin read the word passed without help. His co-workers celebrated. Several admitted they had known he avoided paperwork but had never questioned his intelligence. One younger mechanic said, "You taught everyone in this garage. Now let us help with the part nobody taught you." Calvin continued working until his planned retirement date. 6 months after the show, the Reed family returned for a follow-up segment. Steve held a children's book on the stage. "I hear you brought something," he said. Calvin nodded. "I brought my first book." It was the same story Maya had asked him to read when she was 6. She had saved it for more than 30 years. Maya joined him on stage. Calvin opened the book and read the first page aloud. His voice was slow. He stumbled over 2 words and corrected himself. Nobody rushed him. When he finished, Maya wrapped her arms around him. "I have waited a long time for that story," she said. Calvin smiled through tears. "So have I." Steve turned away for a moment, overcome with emotion. Lorraine watched from the family podium. The reveal that had nearly broken trust between them had led to healing, but she never described her choice as perfect. She told viewers that helping someone did not remove their right to dignity. "I should have found another way," she said. "But once the truth was public, my husband chose courage. That victory belongs to him." Calvin began volunteering at the Literacy Center after retirement. He did not teach reading. He welcomed new students. When frightened adults arrived, he showed them a photograph from Family Feud and said, "The whole country learned my secret before I was ready. You get to share yours in a quiet room. And nobody here will laugh." Enrollment among older men increased. Many said Calvin made it possible to walk through the door without feeling like children. Calvin and Ava also created short audio lessons for adults with dyslexia. Ava handled the technology. Calvin explained how he used patterns, sounds, and memory. Their project was called Listen First, honoring the skill that had carried him through life. 2 years later, Calvin achieved the goal he once thought impossible. He read an entire novel. It took him 5 months. He kept the book beside his bed and marked every completed page with a small orange tab. On the final night, Lorraine sat quietly across the room while he read the last paragraph. He closed the book and placed both hands on the cover. "Was it worth all that work?" she asked. Calvin smiled. Every page, for their 40th anniversary, he gave Lorraine a handwritten letter. The spelling was not perfect, and several words had been corrected. She read it privately because Calvin asked her to. The letter said, You loved me when I believed one missing skill made me less of a man. You were wrong to tell my secret that way, but you were right that fear was taking away my future. Thank you for staying while I learned to forgive you and myself." Lorraine folded the letter and kept it inside the first book he had read to Maya. Years later, Steve spoke about the moment during a conversation on adult education. "I could not believe that a man that smart had spent his whole life thinking he was stupid," he said. "That is what shame does. It takes one struggle and uses it to lie about the whole person." Calvin's story became a reminder that literacy was not a measure of human worth. He had repaired thousands of buses, supported a family, cared for neighbors, and trained generations of workers before he could read a full page. Learning did not make him intelligent. It gave his intelligence another way to move through the world. Lorraine learned a lesson too. Love sometimes required intervention, but urgency did not cancel respect. She could support Calvin without controlling the moment when he shared his pain. Their children learned that parents could possess both wisdom and hidden wounds. Ava learned that dyslexia was not a reason to become smaller. The Family Feud question asked what a husband might hide because he was embarrassed. The survey board recorded the answer in a few words, but Calvin's life gave a deeper answer. People hide the things they believe will make love disappear. Healing begins when the truth is met with dignity instead of laughter. Calvin had walked onto the stage afraid that being unable to read would erase everything he had achieved. Instead, the truth revealed what the secret had hidden all along: his intelligence, resilience, and extraordinary courage.